The Galactic Council sat in the vast chamber on their flagship, the exemplar, the Great Hall, filled with the hushed murmurs of its members, each one an alien species far older and more advanced than humanity, their power, unquestioned, their influence absolute. But something had shifted in the air, a tension had settled over the room, as if an invisible storm loomed just beyond the horizon. Across the galaxy, humanity had become a growing concern, and despite their best efforts, they could not shake the feeling that Earth was on the brink of something greater. The Council had been watching for years as humanity's technological capabilities expanded at an alarming rate. What was once considered primitive was now on the verge of competing with the great powers of the galaxy. The humans had gone from primitive spacefarers to launching advanced satellites capable of detecting deep space anomalies, to discovering new ways of harnessing energy beyond the comprehension of any other species. They were no longer a speck on the cosmic map, but a rising force, and the Council had no intention of letting that continue. Their solution was simple and brutal. Earth had to be subdued. The Council had already seen the destructive potential of human weapons when a group of rebel factions on Earth had stumbled upon ancient alien tech and in a span of mere years managed to reverse engineer it into a deadly new form of warfare. The humans had discovered faster than light travel and had begun to explore nearby systems. Their reach was expanding, their ambitions were too great, and the Council feared they would soon turn their eyes on the rest of the galaxy. In the dark recesses of their meeting hall, the leaders of the Council discussed their plan in secret. The details were clear. The humans would be crushed, their technological advancements dismantled, their hope extinguished. A fleet would be assembled with one goal in mind: to take Earth, to break the spirit of its people, and ensure the galaxy would remain under their control no matter the cost. But as the Council members spoke, the sense of inevitability that had once filled the room began to dissipate like a dying ember. Their plan was set, but they could not shake the nagging feeling that something had changed, something was off. Despite all their surveillance, all their intelligence on Earth, they still didn't know everything there was to know about humanity, and that uncertainty gnawed at them. Commander Selvak of the Zorathian race stood at the head of the table, his sharp eyes scanning the room, his voice cold and commanding. "We proceed with the plan as scheduled. We eliminate Earth's ability to threaten us before they become too much of a liability." He said his words final, but as the murmurs settled in the back of the chamber, the Council's oldest member, the venerable Gen of the Trilaxians, spoke slowly, his voice like gravel. "There is something about humanity. We have overlooked, something we cannot predict." Selvak turned to the ancient figure, an eyebrow raised. "What do you mean?" he asked, but Gen only shook his head, his face unreadable. "I do not know, but I feel it. The moment is near, and we may be too late," he murmured. As the room went silent for a brief moment, a shadow passed over the Council's unity, but the moment was fleeting, and soon their plan was reaffirmed. The order was given. The fleet set to depart. Earth would fall, they would make sure of it. And as the Council prepared to strike, they were unaware of the truth that awaited them, a truth that would forever change their understanding of humanity. The vanguard was already waiting for them in the shadows of deep space. The cold silence of space was broken only by the hum of the Galactic Council's fleet. As it advanced toward Earth, the ships, massive and imposing, glided through the void with the precision of a well-oiled machine. A wave of dread passed through the Council's forces as they neared their target. Earth, the prize they had long awaited, was now within their grasp. But as their ships entered the outer reaches of the solar system, something unexpected happened. A strange anomaly appeared on their sensors, a flicker of energy that didn't match any known patterns of galactic physics. At first, the commanders aboard the ships dismissed it as a glitch in the system, but the anomaly grew stronger and more defined on their displays. Something was there, something hidden in the darkness of space, and before long their doubts turned into confusion as a massive object materialized seemingly from nowhere, a ship enormous and unlike anything the Council had ever seen. It didn't appear from hyperspace or any known form of FTL travel. It was as if it had simply appeared out of thin air. The ship was dark, a shadow against the stars, and as the Council's fleet struggled to make sense of it, the vanguard opened fire without warning. Its weapons flared in blinding bursts of light and energy, cutting through the blackness of space. With frightening speed, the first few shots struck the outermost ships of the fleet, Before they had a chance to react, their shields crumpled under the assault, and their hulls cracked open like eggs under a hammer. The explosion was immediate. The loss of the first ship reverberated throughout the fleet, a ripple of panic spreading as the unknown enemy made its presence known. Across the bridge of the Vanguard, the human crew moved with precise coordination, their faces tense, but resolute. Captain Elias Vance stood at the helm, his hand steady on the controls as the ship's weapon systems came alive. Each shot they fired was calculated and devastating. They had been waiting for this moment for years. The Vanguard was humanity's final answer to the threat of the Galactic Council, and now it was time to send a message to the galaxy that Earth was not to be underestimated. Vance gave the order to fire again. The Vanguard's massive energy cannon flared and tore through a second ship. This one, the larger war cruiser that had attempted to retaliate, its shields buckled under the concentrated blast, and the ship disintegrated into debris as the Vanguard moved seamlessly through the battlefield, firing off wave after wave of energy blasts, its hull impervious to the Council's standard weapons. In the command room of the Council's flagship, Admiral Narration stared in disbelief at the display in front of him, his heart racing as the reports flooded in. Earth's unknown ship had just destroyed 2 of their warships without breaking a sweat. This wasn't a fight anymore. This was a slaughter. He immediately ordered a full retreat, but the chaos that had ensued was already too much to manage, and in the midst of the panic, something even more alarming happened. Another anomaly appeared, a ripple in space, not from Earth, but from deep within the solar system. Another ship, another presence. The Council had barely enough time to comprehend what was happening when Earth's fleet began to emerge from the shadows behind the Vanguard, dozens of ships materializing seemingly from nowhere. The Vanguard wasn't alone. Earth had not only built a warship beyond their imagination, they had an entire fleet ready to strike. The Council's panic turned to dread as the full scale of humanity's power unfolded before them. They had been wrong about Earth. They had underestimated them. And now they were about to pay the price. The fleet of the Galactic Council reeled in shock as the full might of Earth's unexpected counterattack became clear. Ships of every size and shape emerged from behind the Vanguard like a swarm of hornets, each one bristling with weaponry and advanced technologies. The Council's best warships were already in retreat, but they were being hunted down by human forces. The battle was no longer a one-sided affair. It was a massacre, and the Council had no idea how to stop it. Admiral Narration of the Council flagship tried desperately to maintain control. His orders came out in quick succession: retreat, evasive maneuvers, attempt to regroup, but his voice was drowned out by the sound of alarms blaring and officers shouting across the bridge. Their ships were being overwhelmed. Human vessels attacked with precision, each shot aimed at weak points in their defenses. Even as their forces scrambled to retaliate, nothing seemed to work. The humans had anticipated every move. They were faster, more agile, and far more deadly than anyone had imagined. The Vanguard itself was a storm of destruction, its dark hull gliding through space, almost like a shadow as it tore through enemy formations. One by one, the Council's ships began to fall apart, their shields disintegrating under the constant barrage of energy blasts. Human fighters darted between the gaps, leaving chaos in their wake. The Council had never seen anything like it. They had never considered the possibility that humans could possess such mastery over space combat, and every move they made now seemed to push them further into a corner. Commander Selvak of the Zorathians stood in stunned silence, his sharp eyes fixed on the view screen in disbelief. He had spent years studying Earth's defenses, and yet they had been unable to predict this. Humanity's rise had been swift, but not even the most seasoned tacticians among them had anticipated such a display of pure, unrelenting power. The Council's superior fleets were crumbling beneath the weight of human innovation and will, and the battle was turning quickly from a clash of technology to a fight of survival. On the command deck of the Vanguard, Captain Elias Vance stood tall as the battle raged on around him. His crew moved like clockwork, their every action a reflection of years of preparation and training. Humanity had done the impossible. They had not only caught up to the rest of the galaxy, but surpassed them in ways no one had seen coming. Every weapon they unleashed was crafted with purpose, every maneuver executed with precision. This was not a random act of war. It was the culmination of a decade of secrecy and innovation. A young officer beside Vance looked up from his station, eyes wide in awe. "Captain, we're outpacing them. They can't keep up," he said, his voice trembling with disbelief. But Vance remained focused, his eyes locked on the viewport, as the lights of exploding alien ships filled the darkness of space. "Stay sharp," he commanded, his voice low but steady. "They'll regroup soon enough. This isn't over yet." But as Vance spoke, a message flashed across his terminal, a transmission from the heart of the Council's fleet. It was a call for ceasefire, a desperate plea from Admiral Narek himself. "This is Admiral Narek of the Galactic Council. We are offering terms of surrender, ceasefire immediately. We wish to negotiate the terms of our withdrawal." The message crackled through the comms, and for the briefest of moments, silence fell across the bridge of the Vanguard. Vance's hands remained steady on the controls. He looked around at his crew, then back at the message on the screen. So they finally realized the truth. He muttered under his breath before turning to his communications officer. "Send them a response." The officer nodded and keyed in the command for the response, but Vance's face remained cold as he stared out at the chaos unfolding before them, knowing that the true battle had just begun, and the Council's fight for survival had only just started. As the Council's flagship limped back toward the outer edges of the solar system, their fleet broken and scattered, Admiral Narek could only watch in helpless frustration. The vast majority of their warships had been destroyed or disabled in mere hours. The remnants of their forces were now fleeing into the darkness of space, trying to escape the unstoppable might of Earth's forces. But the chase was relentless. The human fleet was closing in from all sides, the Vanguard leading the charge as if it were the spearhead of a tidal wave, and Narek could feel the weight of defeat heavy on his chest. His officers moved frantically at their stations, trying to reroute damaged systems, issue new orders, but there was no strategy left. Their forces were overwhelmed, their escape routes blocked by a relentless onslaught of human ships. Narek's fingers trembled on the armrest of his command chair as his mind raced, trying to find a solution. But the reality of their situation began to set in. Earth had outwitted them at every turn, and the fleet that had once been the pride of the galaxy was now nothing more than a shattered relic of its former glory. On the Vanguard, Captain Vance surveyed the battlefield from his command center, watching as Council ships scattered in every direction. The chaos unfolding before them was breathtaking, but Vance kept his focus sharp. He knew the fight was far from over. Humanity had gained the upper hand, but the Council was nothing if not persistent, and desperate times often brought out the most dangerous tactics in their enemies. "Captain, we've received their surrender message." The communications officer spoke up, the words hanging in the air like a taunt. Vance stood motionless for a moment, his mind processing the implications of the message. His eyes locked onto the flickering screen where Admiral Narek's image had appeared. "They want a ceasefire," the officer added, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Are they really asking for mercy?" Vance shook his head slowly, a wry smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "They're not asking for mercy, they're asking for survival," he muttered, his voice steady but filled with cold resolve. "They know they've lost, but they think they can negotiate their way out of this." The crew around him remained silent as Vance's words sunk in. The reality of their victory was settling in, but it wasn't enough. The Council's offer wasn't a surrender, it was an attempt to buy time, to regroup and rebuild. Earth wasn't going to let them have that luxury. Humanity had proven itself on the battlefield. Now it was time to prove itself in the negotiation room. "Prepare a response," Vance ordered. "We're not offering them peace, we're offering them a choice they won't like." As the crew scrambled to prepare the message, Vance's thoughts turned inward. He had spent years preparing for this moment. His whole life had been building toward it, and now it was coming to fruition. Earth's future would no longer be determined by the whims of a distant and uncaring council. The galaxy was about to learn a harsh lesson about underestimating humanity. The message was brief and to the point. Vance's voice rang out over the comms. "To Admiral Narek and the Galactic Council, your fleet has been defeated. You have no place in this galaxy anymore. Your terms are rejected. We will not accept surrender or negotiations. Your fate is sealed. You will leave Earth's space immediately or face total annihilation. The choice is yours." The transmission cut off abruptly and Vance turned away from the screen, his gaze fixed on the swirling chaos outside the Vanguard's hull. The Council had been given their chance, and they had squandered it. Now Earth would make sure they never forgot who had been foolish enough to challenge humanity. Admiral Narek sat in stunned silence, his fingers gripping the armrest of his chair, as the message from Captain Vance echoed in his mind. The words were clear: humanity was not interested in negotiations. They had drawn a line in the sand, and if the Council didn't back down, the consequences would be severe. Narek's eyes darted around the bridge of the Exemplar, his officers all looking to him for guidance. But he could offer no answers. Earth had shattered their forces in the span of a few hours, and now they were on the verge of total defeat. The idea of abandoning their plans for Earth was unthinkable, but so was the reality of facing humanity's wrath. "Admiral, what are your orders?" A voice cut through the silence. It was a young officer, a lieutenant who was barely out of training, but the panic in his eyes mirrored Narek's own fear. The Council had no backup plan, no strategy for this eventuality. They had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now they were paying for it. Narek took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves, his thoughts racing, his mind flashing back to the moment when the Council had decided to take action against Earth. Their arrogance had blinded them. They had seen humanity as a mere insect to be crushed underfoot, but now they were the ones in danger of being wiped out. "Prepare a full retreat." Narek's voice was hoarse but firm. "We will fall back to the nearest neutral zone and regroup." The officers around him hesitated, their fingers hovering over their controls as if unsure of the words they had just heard. "But Admiral, we cannot simply flee. We still have a fleet left. We can." Another officer started but was quickly cut off by Narek's sharp glare. "We have no fleet left," Narek growled. "The humans are relentless. They'll track us down to the ends of the galaxy. If we don't act now, we cannot fight them any longer." But the officer wasn't done, his voice trembling with fear. "What if we don't leave the solar system? What if we stand and fight one last time?" Narek's jaw clenched as he stood up, his eyes narrowing at the view of Earth's defenses spread across the stars. He could see the bright lights of human ships, closing in like a pack of wolves, circling their prey. The thought of surrendering to Earth was anathema to him. It felt like dishonor. But the truth was undeniable. Humanity's strength had caught them off guard in ways they couldn't have imagined. "We stand no chance against them," Narek muttered almost to himself. "Their technology is beyond ours. They outnumber us, and they have a resolve we've never seen before." His mind raced through every possible option, but they all led to the same conclusion: the Council had lost, and if they didn't abandon their attack on Earth, their very existence would be in jeopardy. "Send the order for full retreat to the fleet," Narek commanded, "and prepare for negotiations with Earth. We have no other choice." As the orders were carried out, Narek could only stare at the chaotic scene unfolding before him. Earth's fleet had encircled the remnants of the Council's forces, and with every passing moment they closed in tighter. The hunt was on, and Narek knew the time for escape was running out quickly. On the Vanguard, Captain Vance watched as the Council's retreat began in real time. His lips curled into a grim smile, but there was no celebration in his heart. There was still too much work to do. Their victory was not yet complete. They had given the Council a chance to leave with their lives, but Earth's future would not be shaped by the whims of the Council. It would be shaped by humanity's will, and they were prepared to see it through to the very end. The retreat of the Galactic Council's remnants was nothing short of chaotic, as their broken fleets scattered across the stars like ants trying to escape a predator's crushing grip. The once proud warships were now just fleeing debris, barely holding together as they drifted further from Earth's orbit. Their command centers in disarray. Panic had set in across the Council's ranks, their commanders issuing desperate orders to abandon ship or fight to the last. But every attempt to regroup was met with Earth's relentless pursuit, the human ships closing in faster than the Council had ever anticipated. Captain Vance stood at the helm of the Vanguard, his eyes scanning the fleet of broken ships as they tried to flee into deep space. His grip on the controls was steady, but his mind was sharp with the knowledge that the battle was far from won. The Council had been defeated, yes, But they were not finished. They would not be content to simply retreat into the void of space and accept their loss. He had seen the desperation in their eyes and knew they would do anything to survive. "Captain, they've begun evasive maneuvers." The weapons officer reported, her voice tense but focused. "They're trying to scatter. We need to take them out before they escape." Vance nodded without hesitation. "Send the order to all ships. Do not let them slip away. The Council has no place in this galaxy anymore." As the Vanguard and the human fleet pressed forward, a sense of finality settled over Vance and his crew. The fight had been brutal, but it was nearing its end. Earth had proven itself a power unlike any other, and now humanity would make sure the galaxy knew its place at the table. There would be no more subjugation, no more manipulation, no more arrogance from the ancient races that had ruled the stars for so long. Across the stars, Admiral Narek paced back and forth. In his command center, his once unshakable confidence had been replaced by a gnawing sense of fear. Every report that came in showed a new Council ship destroyed or incapacitated. The humans were relentless, as if they had all the time in the galaxy to hunt down every last one of them. The Council's remaining ships were scattered and damaged, and no matter how fast they ran, the Vanguard and its fleet were never far behind. Narek's mind worked furiously, trying to formulate a plan of escape, but the truth was undeniable. They were running out of time. His only hope now was the secret weapon the Council had hidden in their arsenal for moments like these. It was a last-ditch effort to hold on to some measure of power, something that could turn the tide in their favor, even if just for a moment. He turned to his senior officers, his voice cold and clipped. "Prepare the Exemplar for emergency hyperspace jump. We'll break through the human fleet and escape into deep space. It's our only chance." The officers around him hesitated, unsure of whether they could even make the jump with so much damage to the ship's systems, but the look in Narek's eyes was one of cold determination. "Do it now," he ordered. Back on the Vanguard, the humans continued their push as the remaining Council ships tried to escape into hyperspace. But just as they thought victory was within their grasp, the unthinkable happened. A massive ripple of energy surged through space. The ships of the Council, including the Exemplar, vanished from sight. In an instant, the hyperspace jump had begun. Vance's eyes narrowed as he stared at the sudden empty space where the Council's flagship had been. "What the hell just happened?" he muttered. "Sir, it's a hyperspace jump," the communications officer confirmed. "They've escaped into deep space. We lost them." For a moment, the bridge fell silent, and then Vance spoke, his voice cold and calculating. "Prepare a pursuit course," he ordered. "We're not letting them slip away. Not now, not after all this." The chase was not over yet. The Council had escaped, but they were not safe, not from humanity's resolve, not from Earth's wrath. The Vanguard sliced through the darkness of space with terrifying precision, its engines roaring as it followed the energy signature left behind by the Council's desperate jump into hyperspace. Captain Vance stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the view screen where the swirling remnants of the hyperspace rift began to fade. His mind sharp, his senses heightened. There was no doubt the Council had made a calculated escape, but that didn't mean they had won, not by a long shot. The humans weren't about to let them vanish into the void of deep space unchallenged. "Sir, we've traced the jump," the navigation officer said, breaking the heavy silence, his voice tense but determined. "They're heading toward the Zorian Fringe. It's a sector known for its uncharted regions and deep nebulae. They'll try to hide there." Vance's lips curled into a tight smile. "They're hoping the isolation will shield them, but they're wrong," he said, his voice cold. "Plot a course for the Zorian Fringe, full speed ahead. We'll catch them before they can disappear again." The crew scrambled into action, their movements fluid as they worked to chart the course. But Vance's mind was elsewhere. The Council's attempt to flee into deep space was nothing more than a temporary solution, a coward's move. They had underestimated humanity's resolve to see this through to the end. And now Earth would make sure they paid for their arrogance. As the Vanguard sped toward the Zorian Fringe, a deep sense of urgency swept over the ship. The Council might have fled, but they had not yet escaped their fate. Earth's fleet was not only hunting them, it was prepared to finish the job once and for all the humans had done the impossible, they had shown that their place in the galaxy was no longer one of subjugation, but of strength, and if the Council didn't understand that, they would learn it the hard way. Meanwhile, aboard the Exemplar, Admiral Narration fought to maintain control of his ship. His officers were scrambling to get the damaged systems online after the Perilous jumped their emergency hyperspace route, had bought them time, but only time. Soon they would be exposed again, and they could not afford another attack from Earth. Their retreat had been only the beginning of their fall. "The humans are relentless," Narration muttered as he stood in front of the main view screen watching the last remnants of the Zorian fringe begin to come into view. "We can't outrun them forever." He turned to his officers. "Prepare the self-destruct sequence. I want the ship ready to scuttle if we're caught." A murmur of surprise rippled through the bridge as his officers exchanged uncertain looks. "But Admiral, we still have a chance to fight back. If we make it to the core of the fringe, we might be able to escape," one officer ventured. Narration slammed his fist down on the table, cutting him off. "You don't understand, do you?" He spat. "Earth is not some small threat we can brush aside. They've crushed us at every turn. They're hunting us down. They want us dead. There's no escaping them now." The officer fell silent, his face pale, as the gravity of the situation set in. Narration could feel the weight of his words sinking in. The Council had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. He looked back at the view screen, his mind spinning with thoughts of how to get out of this situation, how to ensure the Council's survival, even if it meant abandoning everything. Back on the Vanguard, Captain Vance's eyes never left the readings as they neared the Zorian fringe. "We're closing in on their last known position," he said. "Prepare to deploy reconnaissance drones. When we enter the fringe, I want eyes on the ground. And in every corner of this sector, we find them, we finish them." The crew moved quickly to follow the captain's orders, their faces grim with the knowledge of what was at stake. Vance knew this wasn't just about defeating the Council. This was about sending a message to every corner of the galaxy that Earth was not to be trifled with, that humanity had earned its place among the stars, and any who thought otherwise would face the full wrath of Earth's might. As the Vanguard entered the dark expanse of the Zorian fringe, the eerie glow of nebula lit up the void before them. Vance took one last look at the crew around him, his mind locked on the mission ahead. Their victory was close, but the final chapter was yet to be written, and Vance knew there would be no mercy for the Council, only justice. The dark void of the Zorian fringe stretched out before them, a vast and uncharted region of space, where stars were few and nebulous clouds obscured all but the faintest glimmer of light. The Vanguard moved through the shadowed expanse, its engines humming quietly, as the crew prepared for what was to come. Captain Vance stood at the helm, his eyes sharp as ever, his mind calculating the next steps. Every move they made could mean the difference between victory and failure. They had tracked the Exemplar this far, but the Council had one last chance to escape. If they could hide long enough in the nebulous cloud cover, Earth's forces would have to retreat. But Vance had no intention of letting them escape. Earth had fought too hard to bring the Council to justice. They would not be allowed to slink away into the darkness. "Deploy the drones now," Vance ordered, his voice steady, as the ship's systems hummed to life, sending out hundreds of tiny reconnaissance probes into the dark void. The drones spread out like a web, searching for any sign of the Exemplar or any remnants of the Council's fleet. They would not leave any stone unturned. In the depths of the nebula, a faint glimmer of light caught the attention of one of the drones, its sensors pinging as it sent back a feed to the Vanguard. The image flickered on the bridge as the officer manning the controls shouted, "Captain, we found them." Vance's gaze snapped to the screen. The outline of the Exemplar appeared weakly through the swirling clouds of the nebula, its once proud silhouette barely visible through the dense gas and debris. The Exemplar had come to rest near a dying star, its engines dark and silent, like a wounded beast lying in wait for its final fate. "They're cornered," Vance said, his lips curling into a grim smile. "Prepare to engage them full force. Bring us into range." The human fleet, emboldened by their earlier victories, surged forward, their weapons charging as the Vanguard led the charge through the nebula, the Council's last desperate hideout, now a tomb waiting to be sealed. Inside the Exemplar, Admiral Narek's hand trembled as he gripped the command chair. The alarms blared across the bridge, the faint signals of the human ships closing in on their position. There was no time left, no hope of escape. Their power was too great, their resolve too strong. Narek turned to his officers, his eyes wild with desperation. "Activate the self-destruct sequence," he shouted. "If we're going down, we're taking them with us." But the officer at the control panel hesitated, his eyes flicking nervously between the Admiral and the weapons systems. "Sir, we still have some shield power left. We might be able to survive. We can fight back." Narek's face twisted with frustration. "No," he growled. "It's too late. We've already lost." His voice softened as he muttered to himself, "Let them feel the weight of our defeat." On the bridge of the Vanguard, Vance watched the countdown appear on his screen as the Exemplar's weapons powered up for one final stand. The Council ship had been crippled, but it still had enough firepower to take down 1 or 2 human ships before they could finish the job. "Target their engines," Vance barked. "Disable them before they can launch their final attack." The Vanguard's weapons, fired with deadly accuracy, energy blasts tore into the Exemplar's already weakened hull. The Council flagship rocked violently as its shields collapsed under the barrage. Narek's final desperate orders fell on deaf ears as the human ships closed in for the kill. In the final moments, as the Exemplar's engines died and its systems sputtered out, Narek stood alone on the bridge of his dying ship, his eyes staring out into the dark void, as if searching for some distant hope that would never come. The Vanguard moved in close, its cannons aimed directly at the heart of the Exemplar. Vance looked at the dying flagship one last time before giving the order, "End it." The Vanguard fired its final volley, the energy from the blast tearing through the Exemplar's core. In a blinding flash of light, the Council's flagship erupted into a mass of debris and flame, its destruction complete. The battle was over. The Vanguard stood alone in the silence of space as the remnants of the Council's fleet drifted away into the dark cold of space. Their reign was finished, and humanity had claimed its place among the stars. Captain Vance stood tall, his eyes watching the wreckage of the once mighty fleet as his crew breathed a collective sigh of relief. But Vance knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy would never forget what had happened here, and Earth's future was now in its own hands.